Peter, dear, well, I can remember the very first time that we worked together. It was a documentary for the Stock Exchange.
Yes.
And we were on location in a farmyard, I think it was. And in those days, for some reason, the sound, you had to start the camera in three
That's
speeds.
right, yes.
And then when it got to speed, it was up to the sound to shout speed.
That's right.
And off we went.
Yeah.
And you never shouted speed. Do you remember what you did
I not?
instead?
No. I did all sorts of things.
There was an oil can,
Yeah.
and you had a pile of stones. And when you were up to speed, you would throw a stone which would hit the oil can, which was the signal for action.
That saved me saying.
And you, yes, and you never missed.
Oh, that must have been at Woodbridge or somewhere like that, because it was all in Suffolk,
And
apart from
was
the
it
stock.
really?
Yes, apart from the Stock Exchange itself.
And Michael Burkitt directed
Michael
it.
Burkitt directed.
And at the Stock Exchange, you had this neat thing that happened, was because Michael and I were standing, and the head of the Stock Exchange, whoever it is, was James Archibald was in talking to him. And
That's it. Yeah.
finally came out, because James was a very pompous, nice but quite pompous man. And Michael and I were standing outside the door, sort of after you see. And I got introduced to the head of the London Stock Exchange as Lord Burkitt, which was what I was. But we should talk about Tony.
Yeah.
The first time you and I worked with Tony, of course, was Mademoiselle.
Yes.
And I think
Which would have been much better if they'd had a proper editor.
well, the editor from yes.
I mean, you probably don't know what happened because
tell us what
because
happened.
I was there on the post-production with that lovely man Jean Riel. You know, the two of us did the mix, and we both said, Kevin Connor was there as well. He was the sound editor, and we both said this film is ridiculous. And you know, if you remember, it started with what's her name? Jeanne Moreau. Jeanne Moreau, yeah. It started with her doing all the
Wreaking
terrible
havoc.
things that she should have done. And you know, we said this is ridiculous because you've got no sort of drama to follow because you know what's going to happen. And we got Tony in, and Tony said, yes, he said, I think you're right. And he ordered the editor, whose name I forget.
Tony Gibbs.
Tony, oh God, yes. That's why I can't remember the name.
Yes.
He ordered him to re-edit in a different way, so nobody knew what was going to happen.
Exactly.
And it was really very good. And Tony Gibbs went on and on and on, this sort of, that ruined my picture and all the rest of it. And Tony, as he always did with editors, got fed up and said, "Oh, put it back, you know, as it was." And I mean, you know, it was so unsuccessful, which is a shame because
it was a stunning film. Actually,
it really was.
It suffered from that, and it also suffered from not having Brando, which was what should have happened.
Yeah.
The studio wouldn't release him, and
No.
Tony didn't want to wait.
No.
Couldn't have waited.
I know.
Probably.
Oh, it would have been wonderful. It was also a mistake to do the English version.
Yes, that was
It would have been far better left with
all these French extras have been given phonetic.
I know. It's very difficult.
It was a hoot. But Tony asked you to compile because there was no music.
There was no music. Tony, there's something which goes back to The Entertainer. Tony was talking to me about sound. He said there's often too much music in films. There's terribly. That's another story. You must remind me about this, the music in The Entertainer. Anyway, we talked a lot because that was only Tony's second picture, and I said, well, I couldn't agree more. I said, that there's so many ways in which you can use sound effects rather than music, and it doesn't detract from the film, in fact, quite the reverse. And when it came to Mademoiselle, as you know, I couldn't do the film because of the French sort of wanted an all-French crew. Obviously, it was made in France, and no problem. And Tony then said, well, this is the time when I want you to do sound effects only and no music. So when you'd finished the film, and he was off doing Sailor from Gibraltar, very unhappy.
No, that was a disaster.
And I was doing the White Bus, and I suddenly got this message from Tony, come at once to Athens. I said, what's he doing in Athens? He said, well, I'm not in Athens at the moment, I'm in Egypt or something. He said, I will be in Athens. So I said, well, I can't come at the moment because I'm doing the White Bus with Lindsay. So oh, forget that. He said, just
That's Tony. He'd asked me to do a picture, and you say, I'm sorry, I've agreed. Well, get off it.
Yeah, that's right. I said, well, I can't really. There's only a week to go. He said, all right, just when you finish this, come to Athens. So I might be there by then. And so I got on the Orient Express, naturally. Yes. 3 days on the train, and we arrived in Athens. And Tony said, I'm very busy. He said, go and look at the Parthenon.
I had exactly the same.
Yeah,
yes.
That was lovely. So I spent 3 days in Athens talking about what we would do in Mademoiselle. And then it was sort of it was either the end of the year or the beginning of the next year. They were doing a post-production. And of course nothing had really been arranged, but I said, we'll go to Paris and we'll fix it up with the studio there. I had no work permit, and I said to the people in the office, I said, well, really, you should arrange a work permit. Oh, really, should we? You know, all that sort of thing, you know. So they did that. And it took weeks and weeks in the cutting rooms and finding all sorts of sound effects. I mean, I had a lot of French sound effects anyway. And one of the main things, Tony used to come in time to time, and one of the things, I want a distant train. So I said, well, that's no problem, we've got plenty of recordings of French trains. And he came in and sort of, we ran the rough cut. Whatever did you to put a train there for? It sounds like Clapham Junction. All right, well, we won't have the train, we'll have something else, we'll have some birds. But it was a wonderful opportunity to do something different. And I think it worked quite well, actually.
Oh, it did. It did, because again, you see, I had the idea of not moving the camera. The camera
That's right,
because,
you did, I remember.
Because of the shape.
Of course, yes.
You can't
you
can't see both sides of the screen unless you're cross-eyed. So what's the point of panning and stuff? Let the actors and the action.
That's
and
right.
I had this idea about the first day of the picture and showed Tony. Tony went along with it, and the French camera operator was really pissed off because he felt he had
nothing to do.
that terrible Philippe Brun. I remember.
Yeah.